Our war hero general, Yu Ji, returns from the windswept steppes, darker, thinner, and ready for his next glorious campaign. He reports a new, cunning threat rising from the ashes of the old, a tribe secretly building an army and counterfeiting their advanced technology. But the chief, operating on a level beyond mere warfare, isn't thinking about the next battle. He's thinking about the next century. Instead of a new war, Yu Ji is handed the blueprints for a palace and tasked with becoming the CEO of a massive, 5-year construction project. From elite spy to glorified foreman, what a career pivot. Meanwhile, the chief's own grand design for an industrial revolution literally derails. The prototype for a heavy-duty railway fails catastrophically, the steel rails buckling under the strain. They even discover the perfect super steel alloy, only to realize the required ore is on the other side of the map, making it logistically useless. But while the top brass wrestle with engineering and grand strategy, the real conquest is won in a remote village with a simple, devastatingly effective weapon, a photo album, showcasing a world so prosperous and advanced it might as well be magic. On the streets, groups of children chased each other, playing soccer, jumping rope, and throwing sandbags, all of them sweating profusely, their faces beaming with carefree smiles. Guantao looked at the smiling faces of the children in the photos, his heart pounding. Of course, they had time to play. They didn't have to work from dawn to dusk, and they didn't have to worry about their next meal. What kind of fairy tale life was this? Only in a golden age do the common people have the mind for entertainment. While a small photo exhibition was shocking his future in-laws in the courtyard of Shangha village, in mid-March, a fleet of the second batch of immigrants arrived on Cheongzhou Island. These new immigrants, like seeds, quickly took root on the island. They taught the locals how to grow rice and use new farm tools, and they gradually brought the Han tribe's way of life into thousands of households. The paddy field transformation project was in full swing throughout the 6 commanderies of Cheongzhou. It is worth mentioning that the 4 commandery governors who had been appointed to Cheongzhou at the beginning of the year finally set foot on this new land with this batch of immigrants. Voiceover. When it comes to the best ancient PowerPoint roadshow, I only bow to Rin Zhua. With a photo album in hand, he's showcasing everything from national hard power to the People's Happiness Index, a full 360-degree bombardment. Forget Guantao. This combo would probably make the Jade Emperor himself consider getting a Han tribe household registration. This isn't just a simple introduction. It's a dimensional-crushing cultural export. The moment Niu Wei's feet touched his native soil, a wind carrying a mixture of salty sea air and damp earth rushed into his nostrils. That damned familiar feeling. He was back to the island where he had run around naked as a child. But this time, he wasn't the wild boy of yesteryear. He was the newly appointed governor of Xianfeng Commandery, his back ramrod straight, his mind a whirlwind of calculations. Xianfeng Commandery, to put it nicely, had a simple and honest populace. To put it bluntly, it was dirt poor. The land wasn't fertile, the population was sparse, and most of the villagers relied on salt flats, hunched over, evaporating salt to trade for basic necessities from the Exine tribe. But now times had changed. Niu Wei carried his orders, his mind clear as day. Xianfeng Commandery had to walk on 2 legs. On one hand, the pitiful farmland had to be meticulously cultivated, developed to its absolute limit. On the other hand, the old salt workers, who spent their days battling the sea, needed a new way of life. Swish. The Han tribe foreman following Niu Wei unfurled a blueprint. This man, sent by you, had a sharp gaze. His finger tapped on the blueprint, a stream of words Niu Wei didn't understand tumbling from his lips. Pipeline layout, tiered evaporation ponds, power hub. In short, it all meant one thing: renovate the salt flats. In the past, salt production was a gamble with fate. Step 1. Wait for high tide. The seawater would rush in, hopefully without dead fish and rotten shrimp. Step 2. Sun drying. Whether the sun god decided to grace them with his presence directly determined the day's wages. The seawater, dazed by the sun in the rock pools, would gradually increase in salinity, becoming what they called brine. Then came the most grueling part. The workers had to carry the primary brine from the first pool to the second for further drying. When the water in the second pool became even saltier, they would laboriously carry it to the third, and so on, 3 or 4 times, until the brine was so salty it was bitter, and a slight breeze could crystallize it. The final step was to carefully carry this precious, concentrated brine to the highest flat rock beach for the final sprint, crystallization. The whole process was, in a word, stupid. The salt flats here were mostly a gift from nature, rock beaches by the sea, naturally tiered by the waves. At high tide, the seawater would fill them. At low tide, it would leave behind a pool of water. But nature only did half the work. The most fatal part was that the workers had to use bamboo tubes, earthenware pots, animal skin bags, anything that could hold water, to transport the most concentrated brine from the lowest pool to the highest crystallization pool, one trip at a time, before the next high tide. This wasn't salt production. This was a race against the tide. Quick! Faster! The tide is coming. I-O. Thud. A moment of carelessness, a slip of the foot, and a pot of hard work would be returned to the earth. Niue knew how grueling this work was. The 6 salt flats in the Commandery, big and small, the largest being only the size of 3 or 4 football fields, tied down hundreds of laborers. When there was nothing to do, they would gather and chat. When the tide receded, they were short-handed. It was a waste of manpower to an infuriating degree. Niue had thought about it before. Even just giving everyone wooden buckets and shoulder poles, building a proper path, and popularizing iron shovels would save at least 2/3 of the manpower. But what about the output? He couldn't do anything about the output. It depended on the weather. The salt flats were only so big. You couldn't just install an accelerator on the sun or ask the Dragon King to bring the tide in 8 times a day, could you? But for you, these were not problems at all. When Niue saw the steam engine, spewing black smoke and making a clanking racket, being installed by the salt flats, he felt his own brain clank, and a light went on. Carrying water? What era was this, still using people to carry water? With a wave of the Han foreman's hand, a thick iron pipe was plunged into the lowest brine pool. The steam engine coughed a few times, spewing out a thick white steam, and the water pump began to roar. Gurgle, gurgle. The salty, bitter brine was visibly sucked away by an invisible water dragon, flowing up the pipe, and easily pumped into the highest crystallization pool. My heavens! The life-or-death work that had exhausted hundreds of people, racing against the tide, was now done by a few people watching a machine and adding coal. Not enough salt flats. Can't you dig your own? The tide has a cycle. The pump can just draw water directly from the sea. Niue felt that his previous ideas were childishly ridiculous. Forget the steam engine. Even just a few windmills or water wheels to lift the water would be 8 times more efficient than what they were doing now. His mission this time was to smash this dimension-crushing mode of production onto the land of Commandery. Free up the labor from the old salt flats. Some would be given hoes and sent to farm. The cleverer ones would be recruited into the public salt works as workers, earning a monthly salary and living well. Of course, you could also go it alone. The tribe's laws were clear. Private salt works were allowed, but you had to pay a tax so heavy it would make you wince. And not a single grain of the salt produced could be sold privately. It had to be sold to the tribe at the government's set price. At first, Niue couldn't figure it out. Isn't this just putting on your pants to fart? You let them do it, but you don't let them sell it. What's the point? It wasn't until he had read the entire order 3 times that he slapped his thigh, a cold sweat breaking out on his back. Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. He finally understood your plan. If it were all a government monopoly, after a while, wouldn't the officials become corrupt, falsify production numbers, and pass off low-quality salt? Now, by letting the private sector compete with the government, when the tribe came to purchase, a comparison of the quality and quantity of the salt produced by both sides would make it clear who was slacking off and who was up to no good. Hiss. Niue sucked in a breath of cold air. This chief's mind was deeper than the sea. While Niue was starting a productivity revolution in Commandery, 2 other chess pieces were also placed on the board of Cheongzhou Island. Jean Mao, an old hand who had managed a large tribe of several thousand people, had arrived in the southern Guanhai Commandery. The population was small, but the land was fertile, perfect for growing grain. With him in charge, a future grain-producing commandery was already on the horizon. On the other end, Jiang Xian had also arrived in Choyang Commandery. He was equally experienced and immediately put agricultural production at the top of his agenda. As for the 4 trawlers he had just been given, the fish and shrimp they caught would be consumed within the commandery for now. He couldn't count on them to make a fortune just yet. The entire Cheongzhou Island, like a huge machine wound up tight, began to turn slowly but steadily, accompanied by the roar of steam engines and the hustle and bustle of officials. Voiceover. Look at the dimensional crushing power of the Industrial Revolution on a primitive tribe. While they were still struggling and gambling with fate, you just slapped the steam engine and the KPI assessment system on their faces. Niue's worldview has been shattered. He thought his ultimate goal was the finish line, but it was just the starting line drawn by the boss. Niue, I'm tired. I feel like I'm just a screw turner, and the real grand designer is watching from the heavens. The bedrock of the Han tribe was a principle engraved in their very bones: agriculture as the foundation. Combined with your freshly minted 5-year plan, farming was, and always would be, the highest priority. As for the bounty of the sea, until aquaculture could be established on a grand scale, it would serve as a welcome addition of meat to the common folks' bowls. The people of Chaoyang Prefecture were enduring a life of bitter hardship. They were so impoverished they were forced to eat seafood with every meal. Prefect Jiang Xian struck his breast, his heart aching with vicarious grief, and swore a solemn oath. By the latter half of the year, Chaoyang Prefecture would achieve food self-sufficiency. Every last citizen would enjoy the good life, with rice at every meal. Of course, ideals alone were not enough. One also needed capital. To boost the villagers' income, Jiang Xian's gaze drifted towards the horizon, and his thoughts returned to the sea. He first sought out Inspector General Xue Qingyao. then presented himself at the doorstep of Cheongzhou's Grand Marshal, Yang Feng. The three men put their heads together, and from their council, a brilliant plan was forged. Chaoyang Prefecture would produce salted and dried fish to supply the armies of Cheongzhou's 6 prefectures. Gods above, that was an army of tens of thousands to feed. Did soldiers not need meat? From where was it to come? Sea fish was the perfect answer, a veritable gift from the heavens. First, it did not compete with agriculture or animal husbandry for resources. Second, the current glut of seafood was so immense it could not be sold. Every time a fishing boat returned to port, its holds were bursting, the decks so slick with silver bodies that a man could scarcely find his footing. As a result, the price of fish had plummeted until it was practically given away. To keep their 4 precious fishing boats from rotting in the harbor, the fishermen were more than willing to sell their catch to the army at a low price. Besides the soldiers, they could find no other major buyer. Excellent. Let us proceed. Xue Qingyao and Yang Feng were in immediate accord. This was a case of the military supporting local development, while simultaneously saving a considerable sum on military expenses. Procuring mutton from the distant grasslands was not only a long and arduous journey, but by the time it arrived, it was often too late. Yang Feng procured a trial batch and found that the motley collection of sea fish tasted quite good. He then recommended it to the bustling construction site of the Cross Sea Bridge in Jiahai Prefecture. The scale of that operation was staggering. The construction site was home to 15,000 prisoners of war, soldiers, and artisans. These brawny men, toiling from dawn till dusk, were desperate for meat. Cheap and plentiful sea fish was a benefit tailor-made for them. Thump, thump. 2 orders, so massive they landed with the weight of mountains, came crashing down. The Yu clan's 4 humble twin-masted trawlers were instantly stretched beyond their limits. Even working around the clock, they could not keep up with the demand. Jiang Xian, his face flushed with excitement, dispatched urgent letters to Yu and Xue Qingyao, requesting more fishing boats. We must expand the scale. If we do not add more vessels, these orders will slip through our fingers. By the time the letter reached your hands, you were already plotting how to pry open the great treasure chest of the ocean. You knew in your heart that only when the Han tribe's fishing boats swarmed the coastal waters like locusts would the fishermen's courage swell, their voyages venturing ever further from the shore. Only by letting them witness the ocean's boundless wealth with their own eyes would their gaze shift from their small plots of land to that endless, azure expanse. This was not merely about drawing a nautical chart. It was about forging a maritime spirit in the hearts of your people, the most solid foundation for future overseas expansion. As for discovering new continents and colonizing foreign lands, you rubbed your chin, figuring you likely wouldn't see it in your lifetime. Still, letting that young Luo Chung give it a try held a certain appeal. To achieve these 2 strategic objectives, you, with a flourish of the pen, brought 2 major support policies to life. First, there must be boats. More boats. A fishing boat was prohibitively expensive. Forget the ordinary fisherman. Even some of the wealthier households in the tribe could not afford one. What was to be done? You directly instituted the leasing system that the Hanyang and Riyang prefectures had already mastered. The tribe would establish a fisheries administration office, which would secure loans from the bank to construct a fleet. Then, much like a livery stable, it would lease the boats to registered fishermen. The fishermen would take the boats to sea, and after selling their catch, they would pay the rent and daily maintenance fees. The rest of the profit was theirs to keep. Furthermore, after a fisherman had leased a boat for a set number of years, ownership of the vessel would be transferred directly to him. This model was more flexible than even the mortgages of later generations. There was no crushing monthly payment deadline, which greatly reduced the pressure. If a man wished to go to sea today, he rented a boat for the day. If he wished to rest tomorrow, he returned it without spending a copper. For the tribe, although the return on investment was slow and the initial outlay was immense, it was the fastest way to nurture the growth of a massive fishing fleet. This was a strategic investment well worth making. Second, develop processed seafood products. You pondered how sea fish were good for much more than just eating. For instance, you could establish canneries on Cheongzhou Island and in Tuahai Prefecture. The fish could be made into various flavored canned goods, greatly extending its shelf life. With that, the grasslands, the 8 northern prefectures, anywhere could become your market. Only by expanding the market could productivity truly soar. What's more, every part of the fish was a treasure. The meat could be canned for human consumption. The guts, once fermented, became top-grade organic fertilizer for farmers. The skin and bones could be crushed into a high-protein powder to feed pigs, cattle, and sheep, or even to raise freshwater fish and shrimp. Heavens! A single fish could invigorate the entire agricultural and livestock supply chain. And it did not stop there. To develop fisheries, you needed shipyards, did you not? Think of the employment that would create. To make cans, you needed tinplate, glass, and ceramic factories. How many jobs would these packaging industries provide? Once the goods were produced, they had to be transported. Shipping them across the land would give the entire transportation industry a massive boost. The more you considered it, the more your excitement grew. Developing the fishing industry was not just broadening horizons, it was unearthing an inexhaustible gold mine. In the future, the tax revenue alone would be an astronomical sum. No matter how you calculated it, this investment was a surefire victory. In the third month of the first year of the Daming era, the lands of the Han tribe echoed with the roar of construction. Granaries and well houses shot up like mushrooms after a spring rain. On Cheongzhou Island, the immigrants and officials had all settled in, busy harvesting the first crop of corn and preparing for the full-scale planting of rice in April. On this day, at the very end of the third month, an urgent letter from Xing'an Prefecture was delivered into your hands. Chief, your personal guard announced, standing respectfully before your desk. A letter from Lin Fei of Xing'an Prefecture. He reports that the Striver model locomotive is nearing completion and is currently undergoing final adjustments. He asks if you wish to inspect it. Also, the test run requires a railway. Should this first line be built in the mountains for the mines, or should it follow the original plan for the heavy freight line? Oh, your interest was piqued, and you reach for the letter. Tucked inside, alongside Lin Fei's report, was a photograph. In the image, a dark iron beast rested quietly. This was the Striver locomotive. It was about the length of a small room. The cylindrical boiler at its front was only 3 or 4 meters long. Its height, you compared it to a worker standing nearby and realized the machine only came up to the man's waist, 1.3 meters at most. It possessed none of the majestic, intimidating presence one might expect of a steam engine. Instead, it resembled an oversized tin toy, appearing both small and strangely endearing. You nodded in satisfaction, your mind racing. Where to build the first railway? In the mountains? No, the impact would be too small. Besides the miners, who would know that the Han tribe possessed such a marvel? Its debut had to be a spectacle, an earth-shattering event witnessed by the masses. Build that one. The line running from the Xing'an steel mill straight to the Weishan Prefecture docks. Although technical limitations made a heavy freight railway impossible for now, you would first construct a narrow-gauge light rail. This type of railway was not difficult to build. The ground needed only to be leveled and compacted, a process not much slower than building a road. It is settled. You slapped the table and issued the order. I took up my brush. With a few swift strokes, the reply was complete. I blew on the still wet ink, turning to the guard at my side. Immediately, get this letter to Lin Fei at once. Tell him to follow the instructions precisely. Manpower will not be an issue. I will dispatch slaves to him. Have him coordinate with Dali and assign men to keep a close watch. There can be no mistakes. I paused, adding for emphasis. And tell him I leave for Xing'an Prefecture on the morrow. On the day of the test run, I must be on that train. Yes, sir. The guard clasped his hands, took the letter, and vanished in a flash. Just then, Xiao Dai and Zhang Ying, both heavy with child, entered the study with the quiet grace of swans, carrying a platter of delicate pastries and fragrant, steaming tea. Xiao Dai's keen eyes fell upon the photograph in my hand, and her lovely brow furrowed. My husband, can you not watch safely from the ground? Must you board that iron contraption? What if something were to happen? What would become of the Han? What would become of us? I chuckled at her concern and casually passed them the photograph of the locomotive. My dear ladies, look here. They call this a train, but it's not even as tall as the donkey in our courtyard. The chassis is as low as the edge of a brick bed, and it cannot go very fast. It moves at roughly the same speed as the small model in our courtyard. Pointing at the map, I continued to reassure them. Besides, you both know the road from Xing'an Prefecture to Weishan Prefecture. The land is as flat as a stretched height. With this train, on that road, and me sitting comfortably in the very last car, what could possibly happen? If I had a sudden urge to jump off, the worst I would suffer is a bruised backside. But Zhang Ying was still unconvinced. Before the words could leave her cherry-red lips, I cut her off. No more buts. This is a world-changing event for our Han people. It will be written in the annals of history. If I, the chief, am not present, what kind of message would that send? Seeing my resolve, the two of them could press the matter no further. I took the chance to pull them close, stroking their swollen bellies and soothing them with gentle words. Only then did I turn to summon my personal guards, unleashing a torrent of commands. One went to arrange my itinerary for the following day, another rode off to mobilize the slaves, and a third went to contact the managers of the entire construction project. The railway connecting Xing'an Prefecture to the Weishan Prefecture docks would be known simply as the Exinway line. The line stretched for about 150 kilometers, crossing plains and hills over flat terrain, making it easy to lay. But I had decided that a single track was too inefficient. If a train left Xing'an, the other end at Weishan would have to wait. An unforgivable waste of time. Might as well do it right. 2 tracks, side by side. a dedicated line for coming and going. With that, the total length doubled to 300 kilometers. On the Xingang end, 3 stations had to be built, one with a direct line to the coal depot to guarantee the supply of coke for steelmaking, one at the steel rolling mill to facilitate the transport of finished steel products, and another connected to the granary. After all, those steel-obsessed fanatics in Xingang still needed to eat, did they not? On the Weishan end, as a major prefecture, the city where the docks were located required a main station. Furthermore, a small county to the west called Liyuan, which lay directly on the railway's path, also had to have a stop. As for the few counties along the lake, we would connect as many as possible. Let the train roar past, woo-woo, and breathe life into the economies all along the route. As for the manpower, I had that figured out long ago. We would use the Xian tribe prisoners of war captured from the grasslands last year. Let them build this railway with their own hands, and let them see with their own eyes just what manner of power they had provoked. My orders grew wings and flew to every corner of the land. Upon receiving their orders, Lin Fei and Dali in Xingang Prefecture immediately began to form construction teams. Jingyin in Dongxing Prefecture also received the notice, telling him to pack up the 1,600-odd surrendered Xian tribe soldiers and send them to Weishan Prefecture. Jingyin grasped the implications at once. The train was about to become a reality. Although transferring this batch of slaves would temporarily decrease coal production, once the railway was complete, would labor ever be a concern again? Without a second thought, he waved his hand and had the men loaded onto ships and sent away. This group of Xian tribe prisoners had been digging coal in the mines of Dongxing Prefecture for a full year. At first, they had resisted and caused trouble. But after paying a price of nearly 100 lives, they had finally learned to obey. Mining was filthy, exhausting work. The Han overseers treated them not as humans, but as beasts of burden. Yet they were fed 3 full meals a day, and as long as they were compliant, they were not beaten. Gradually, they grew numb. They resigned themselves to their fate. They thought they would spend the rest of their lives digging black rocks in these sunless mines until the day they died. Today, however, the sun seemed to rise in the west. The overseer actually let them off work early and even herded them to the river to bathe. "Uncle, what's gotten into them? What's this all about?" A boy of 16 or 17 asked his clan uncle as he scrubbed the coal dust from his body. "Who knows? But look at those ships at the dock. They don't look like they're for transporting coal. They look as if they're here for us." The uncle squinted, his mind racing with speculation. "For us? Where are they taking us? I thought we would die here." "Huh. What does it matter where we go? We will still work for our food. I care for nothing else now. It is enough to be alive." The youth was worried. "I'm just afraid they're sending us to our deaths." The uncle gave a bitter laugh. "If they need to throw lives away, they'll use us old men first. You youths can still work for many years. The Han wouldn't be so quick to waste you." The boy fell silent. The water washed over his young body, but it could not wash away the bitterness in his heart. "Uncle, I heard our tribe was destroyed by the Han at the start of the year. Is it true? Who knows? And what does it matter to us if they were destroyed or not? It's not as if we can ever go back." A middle-aged man nearby, his voice hollow with despair, chimed in. Just then, the overseer's roar came from the bank. "Cut the chatter. Hurry up and wash. Get clean so you can eat your fill. After this meal, we're sending you to a good place." Such mastery of a grand design. From strategic planning to the selection of the workforce, even the psychological impact had been weighed. It was the perfect blueprint for a master builder of nations. To have the enemy build your country, and what's more, to make them view it as a reprieve, was a stroke of genius as savage as it was brilliant. The wretched prisoners of the Xian tribe, still believing they were being marched to their doom, had no inkling they were about to witness the dawn of a new age, and that they, of all people, were to be its builders. As the wheels of history grind forward, some are destined to be crushed beneath them, while others are carried along by their force. Just as the slaves whispered and splashed in the river, a figure materialized on the pier. Crack! A black leather whip split the air with a deafening report. "Shut your mouths. Do you want to go without supper?" The overseer's roar thundered across the water. The slaves flinched, not daring to utter another sound. At the threat of a missed meal, a frantic energy seized them. They scrubbed themselves with renewed vigor before scrambling ashore, one after another, and lining up obediently to eat. Thinking of escape? A foolish notion. They were all too familiar with the punishment for a squad of 5. If one man ran, the other 4 in his unit would be executed. The next 5 unlucky souls in line would also feel the bite of the whip and the pangs of an empty stomach. When first captured, there had been over 1,700 of them. A few, defiant and disbelieving, had tested the system. The result? This brutal method of collective punishment had whittled their numbers down to just over 1,600. The memory of nearly 100 severed heads was the most effective deterrent. Now, if a man so much as harbored a thought of running, the overseers scarcely had to lift a finger. The other 4 men in his squad would be the first to wrestle him to the ground and drag him before the overseers to curry favor. The reason was simple: they were afraid of dying. Over time, they grew accustomed to this wretched life where they ate, slept, and relieved themselves in their designated groups of 5. No one thought of escape anymore. It was not worth the price, and this godforsaken land was a world away from home. To run was simply to choose a different way to die. That evening, their bellies full, the slaves were herded onto sailboats. For the first time, they left the Dongxin Prefecture coal mine, where they had toiled for a year. For the first time, they understood that the black rocks they had been digging were being transported to a place impossibly far away. 3 days later, at dawn, after gnawing on hard, dry rations in the ship's hold, the slaves were ordered onto the deck. Everyone up. Move your legs. We'll be disembarking soon. A jolt went through every man's heart, their palms slick with nervous sweat. Now that they had left the coal mine, what new hell were the Han taking them to? They walked onto the deck with trepidation, and then, as one, they froze. Before them stood a city of a scale they had never imagined, Weishan Prefecture. The harbor teemed with sailboats of all sizes, packed as tightly as dumplings in a pot. On the shore, massive wooden cranes groaned as they hoisted basket after basket of black coal onto the land. 2 different types of coal were being loaded onto 2 different types of horse-drawn carts, which were forming a convoy so long it stretched beyond the horizon. The cart drivers squatted in 2s and 3s at small stalls by the docks, slurping hot soup, a trace of melancholy on their faces. They had heard that the tribe was building an iron road straight to Xinjiang Prefecture. Soon, their services might no longer be needed. In the Han lands, however, unemployment was not a fear. If you were laid off from one job, there was always another waiting. Still, leaving a place one had known for so long always brought a touch of reluctance. After finishing their meal and buying some rations for the road, the drivers returned to the docks just in time to see several new ships mooring. A group of overseers, whips in hand, was directing a long line of slaves off the vessels. The drivers exchanged a knowing glance. The road builders have arrived. These slaves from the Xian tribe were witnessing such a bustling city for the first time. The towering white lighthouse, the imposing city walls, the frenetic harbor. Not even the 3 Kaiyuan prefectures combined could compare to the vibrancy of this place. Stop gawking. Form up in your squads. The overseer's roar pulled them from their stupor. The slaves quickly fell into their familiar lines of 5, and then heard another command. 5 squads to a platoon. Each platoon will carry a flag. Follow the flag. No shouting, no fighting, no running. Violators will be punished under the collective system. Soon, white flags inscribed with Xianwei Railway Engineering Corps, XX Platoon, were distributed. They had little time to take in the prosperous city before they were divided into teams and marched west in a long, shuffling column. The road under their feet was a dirt path, packed hard by years of coal carts. It was caked in a thick layer of black dust, the ruts worn deep and dark. Where are we going? Who knows? But judging by this road, we're headed wherever those black rocks go. The slaves murmured amongst themselves, but their feet never dared to stop. On that very same day, I was preparing to set off for Xinjiang Prefecture. I had just swung onto my beloved black stallion, ready to ride, when a pretty figure appeared at the gate, blocking my path. You. Tang Yao's large, bright eyes blinked as she looked up at me. I heard that self-moving iron cart is ready. Are you going to see it? Take me with you, please. I want to see it too. I raised an eyebrow. You? What for? We ride for speed. You cannot ride. Will you follow on a bicycle? Can you even keep up? Hearing that I had not outright refused, Tang Yao's heart bloomed with joy. She asked tentatively, so you'll take me? I pondered for a moment, then nodded. Fine. Go pack a few things. Be quick. We leave immediately. Yes. Tang Yao nearly jumped for joy. She quickly took a pre-packed bundle from Xiao Dai, who stood beside her, then ran to my horse and looked up at me with pleading eyes. I glanced at Xiao Dai, who had so readily handed over the luggage, a wry smile playing on my lips. Well now, I thought, she must have arranged this. She had leaked the news to Tang Yao, knowing that she and Zhang Ying, both heavy with child, could not travel. Had she sent Tang Yao to look after me? And perhaps, to play matchmaker and formally bind the Tang tribe to us? A clever plan, indeed. My hands did not stop moving. I steadied my mount, reached down to take Tang Yao's small hand, and with a surge of strength in my arm, lifted the delicate girl onto the horse's back, settling her securely in my embrace. Ah! Tang Yao's cheeks flushed crimson. Seated within my arms, she nervously clutched the reins, not daring to move a muscle. A guard deftly hung her bundle from the saddle. Everything was ready. I tugged the reins, gently nudged the horse's flank, and it turned in a circle. I looked back at Xiao Dai. We are leaving. We may be gone for more than half a month. You and Zhaning be well, and look after our children. Do not worry, my husband, Xiao Dai murmured, straightening his collar. We have maids at home, and mother visits often. It is you who must be careful. Do not always try to be the hero. You are the pillar of our Han people. Nothing can be allowed to happen to you. Her tone shifted, and her gaze flickered towards Tang Yao, a knowing smile on her lips. Sister Tang Yao, while Sister Zhaning and I are away, our husband is in your care. Tang Yao's face turned the color of a ripe pomegranate. Her head bobbed in a series of short, frantic nods, not daring to even look back at me. After bidding my family farewell, I wheeled my horse around. With a retinue of personal guards, we kicked up a cloud of dust and galloped toward Xingang Prefecture. The spring wind rushed to meet us. Tang Yao, held before me, bounced with the horse's rhythm. Her long, black hair danced wildly in the wind, whipping across my cheeks with the faint scent of soap. This constant jostling would not do. I grumbled to myself, gripping the reins decisively with one hand while my other arm shot out, encircling Tang Yao's slender waist and pulling her firmly against me. The body in my arms stiffened instantly, and Tang Yao's face flushed so red it looked as if it might burst. She turned her head, her large, limpid eyes filled with inquiry. What is wrong with him today? Has he taken the wrong medicine? He usually ignores me completely. Seeing her complex expression, a mixture of nervousness, indignation, and a hint of curiosity, I decided to be direct. Tell me, as a future chief of your tribe, are you truly planning to marry me? Will that aunt of yours, Tang Ji, actually agree? She will, Tang Yao blurted out without a second thought. Aunt Ji is no fool. Who cannot see the power of the Han? Setting all else aside, just look at your production techniques, your written language, your administration, your currency. Which of those could our Tang tribe possibly develop on our own? She tilted her face up, her gaze earnest. Aunt Ji and I both know that if the Tang do not merge with the Han, if we do not truly become one family, you would never share your most valuable secrets. Am I right? Of course. I grinned, my admission immediate. There was nothing to hide. My people were my people. Why would I teach all my exclusive techniques to a mere partner? There would be no free rides. I paused, then pressed on. From the sound of it, you and your aunt have already decided on the merger? Tang Yao nodded emphatically. Yes, Aunt Ji has intended this for a long time. She was merely waiting for the right moment to formally propose it. But your tribe is not ruled by your aunt alone, is it? I questioned. She may agree, but will those old counselors be willing to hand over their authority? At this, Tang Yao rolled her eyes playfully. As long as my aunt and I agree, what use is their opposition? She huffed, a note of pride in her voice. With the fate of the Xian tribe as an example, anyone who cannot see the situation clearly must first consider their own standing. Besides, I trust you. With the Han in charge, everyone's lives will only improve. With good food and drink, what grounds do they have to object? And even if they do, who would listen to those old fossils? Not bad, little lady. I nodded in satisfaction. After benefiting from our ways for over a year, her mind had certainly sharpened. Her looks, her bearing, her ideological awareness, it was all increasingly to my liking. It seemed that in this era, if one wanted a satisfactory wife, a bit of advanced tutelage was an indispensable step. Meanwhile, the slave army of the Xian tribe was on its own long march toward Xingang Prefecture. The journey of over 100 kilometers, which they walked for 5 full days, had worn the wretches down to bone and sinew. At first, they could see farmland and villages. After 2 or 3 days, the landscape dissolved into a desolate wilderness, with nothing but the black coal slag road beneath their feet and an empty expanse where one could not even find a crooked tree. If not for the few horse-drawn carts they saw shuttling back and forth each day, they would have suspected they were being taken somewhere to be quietly disposed of. On the 5th day, a massive city finally appeared on the horizon. It was a major city, that much was clear from its scale alone. But strangely, the city walls seemed incomplete. Only the main city was walled. The industrial districts and steel mills outside were connected to the city proper, open and unsealed, as easy to traverse as a marketplace. What is this place? The black rocks we dug are probably all sent here to be smelted, someone whispered, gazing at the behemoth before them. Who knows, and who cares? Just do the work. The man next to him said with an air of indifference. Indeed, besides work, what else could they do? It wasn't as if the Han would ever release them. Everyone, be quiet. Sit and rest where you are, the guards' voices roared. One person from each platoon, come with me to get food. We will speak to you after you have eaten. The slaves sat down with a rustle on the open ground outside the city, a low buzz of discussion rising among them. Look at this barren place. It's probably another mine. They aren't going to make us switch locations and keep digging, are they? Before the words had faded, the men who went for food returned. They carried not only shoulder poles laden with steaming hot meals, but were also followed by several large horse-drawn carts. Clang, clang. Someone stretched his neck for a look and was instantly dumbfounded. The carts were not loaded with mining equipment. They were filled with long-handled sledgehammers, pickaxes, rakes, shovels, and even small wheeled rammers and 1,000-pound stone rollers. Gods above, are they going to make us build a road? Do you need sledgehammers and rakes to build a road? Just as their minds filled with confusion, a guard cleared his throat and stood before the crowd. Listen, all of you, his voice was like a great bell. Your chance has come. Our chief is a benevolent man. Seeing your pitiable state, he is now giving you a chance to become new men. From this day on, you will no longer dig in the mines. You are going to learn a new skill, road building. As long as you study hard and work diligently, once this road is completed, the chief will grant you the status of Han citizens. You will be registered in the household records. From then on, you will no longer be slaves. In the future, you will be specifically responsible for road construction, and you will be paid for your labor. The tribe will also help you find wives, settle on your own land, and have children. The Exian tribe on Bamboo Island is gone. It is now called Cheongjo Island, and it is our Han territory. Even if you run, you have no home to return to. Whether you want to remain a slave for the rest of your life or strive for a better future, you had better weigh your options. For those who understand, after you finish eating, I will assign your tasks. The entire open space fell deathly silent. Then, the crowd erupted with a roar. Released from slavery? Given household registration? Given land? And paid to marry a wife? Was this a gift from the heavens? A bold slave stood up, trembling, and asked, Sir, did I hear you correctly? As long as we build roads for the Han, we will no longer be slaves. That is right, the guard confirmed with absolute certainty. The chief's word is his bond. If he says he will give you a place among his people, he will not give you a worthless promise. These warriors of the Exian tribe were not savages. They were prisoners of war, men who could be civilized. As long as they were willing to submit, I did not mind granting them status, which would also conveniently increase my tribe's population. A masterful use of the carrot. From the subtle cultivation of a future wife to the mass indoctrination of prisoners, the chief's true power lies in his ability to shape minds and wills. It is a formidable tactic to dangle the dream of a future so brightly that men will burn themselves out to achieve it. To give an enemy hope is to make him your most fervent builder. This was more than building a road. It was a grand strategic maneuver. I would use this ready-made labor force, dangling the promise of citizenship before them, and forge them into the finest construction corps this land had ever seen. This was a foundation of talent that no amount of money could buy. At that moment, on the nascent construction site, the slaves who had moments before been subsisting on scraps were now wolfing down golden cornmeal buns, their faces flushed as if they had been drinking cheap, potent wine. Hey, do you think if we get Han citizenship, we can ever go back home? How should I know? Why don't you go ask that grim-faced guard? You go? I wouldn't dare. The man looks like he could skin you with his eyes. What does it matter if we go back? A man with clever eyes remarked around a mouthful of his bun. Didn't you hear the guard? Even with citizenship, we follow the core and build roads. But we'll be paid for it. That changes everything. That's right, another man slapped his thigh. Getting paid means we're working for ourselves. Save up some money, find a wife, have a child, that's a life with a future. In an instant, the entire clearing buzzed with hopeful discussion. And those who disagreed, who still yearned for the coal pits and a life sentence, there were none. Even if there were one or two with minds as dull as stone, they would have been silenced by the glares of those around them. This was the chance for a new life. Anyone who dared jeopardize it would be an enemy to them all. The meal was finished. Everyone sat obediently in their places, their backs straight as spears. The guard scanned the crowd with satisfaction and nodded. Very good, a guard boomed, his voice carrying over the assembly. It seems no one misses the taste of coal dust. Now let's talk about the mission. The road we are going to build is called a railway. Listen closely. The work is divided into 3 steps. If you cannot keep up, you can crawl back to the mine yourself. First team, you will build the roadbed. Follow the marked lines, level the ground, and ram it hard with the tampers. Once it's solid, you will sprinkle it with white lime, and then flatten it with the large rollers. Second team, you will lay the sleepers. Pre-cut logs will be delivered. You will place them precisely as the foreman instructs. Third team, you will lay the rails. You will lift those iron beams, place them on the logs, and then nail them down tight with spikes. Finally, you will fill the gaps between the logs with crushed stone, and the road will be complete. He paused, his eyes sharpening. Let me be clear. This is not easy work. You will all take turns, and every man must learn every skill. When this road is finished, if any man is still clumsy, do not blame me for not warning you. You will watch as others get homes, land, and wives, while you crawl back to the mine to be buried with the rocks. Do you all understand? Understood. Over 1,000 men roared in unison, their voices shaking the fields. The slaves, who had been giddy with excitement just a moment before, felt a jolt in their hearts. The Han's generosity did not come without a price. This work sounded complex. To fail was to be sent back to that living grave. At the thought of others having a wife, children, and a warm bed, while they chipped away at black rock in a sunless pit, a silent vow passed through the ranks. The look in their eyes was harder and more resolute than that of any soldier marching to war. At that same time, from the city walls of Xinjiang Prefecture, I watched through a telescope, a confident smile on my lips. Tang Yao and a group of personal guards stood behind me, looking out at the dusty, burgeoning construction site in the distance. Driven by both hope and fear, the Han Railway Construction Corps was about to be born. 1,631 men, organized into 32 platoons, marched in disciplined columns to the open ground outside the locomotive factory. At the entrance of the factory, a demonstration had been laid out. Two gleaming, dark I-beam steel rails, resting on a row of wooden sleepers, stretching into the distance. The minds of the slaves reeled at the sight. Gods, my gods! This is the road we're to build. That's iron, isn't it? It's made of iron. The Han are paving a road with iron. Have they found a mountain of it? Countless men stood dumbfounded, their jaws slack with astonishment. What are you worrying about? The man next to him, more pragmatic, muttered. If they tell us to build it with gold, we build it. Just listen to the guards, learn the work, and don't get sent back to the mines. That would be a terrible fate. Soon, the tasks were assigned. On the construction site, white lime lines marked the work areas, and red streamers fluttered in the wind. Begin. With a single command, over 1,000 men became a swarm of diligent ants. Shovels flew, leveling the high ground. Rakes clattered, filling the pits. The ramming teams chanted in rhythm, their heavy tools pounding the earth. Thump, 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 a beat that seemed to hammer directly on the hearts of the men. Dig, fill, ram. Dig again, fill again, ram again. The roadbed rose inch by inch, the drainage ditches on either side gradually taking shape. Every man threw his entire being into the work, as if they were not tamping down earth, but forging their very own destiny. And so begins the epic saga, the forging of a nation builder. Yesterday's prisoners are today's pioneers. This is not merely the construction of a road. It is the paving of a path to a new life with sweat and hope. The promise of citizenship, a family, a steady livelihood, the most powerful incentive ever offered. For them, the choice was simple: build a road to the future today, or return to the dust of the mines tomorrow. These future railway engineers worked as if possessed. One guard, his throat raw from shouting, led his platoon to a small hill to dig earth, which was then transported to the construction site in clattering horse-drawn carts. The soil from the drainage ditches dug on either side of the roadbed was not wasted, immediately used to fill in the foundation. The old saying, "Many hands make light work," proved to be no exaggeration. 32 platoons, over 1,000 men, swarmed the area like a colony of ants relocating its nest. In a single morning, a 2-kilometer-long earthen roadbed appeared as if by magic. And this was the result of their first day, their movements still clumsy and unfamiliar. By the time they stopped at dusk, a 10-kilometer-long earthen dragon stretched across the landscape. That night, in the open field beside the site, a few tents were sparsely pitched. Most men, however, could not be bothered. They simply found a mound of earth for a pillow, spread out a grass mat, and took the sky for their blanket and the ground for their bed. The moment their heads hit the earth, a chorus of snores like rolling thunder erupted. The next morning, the engineering corps officially split into specialized teams. The diggers continued to dig, the foundation layers continued to lay, and the rammers continued to ram. And then, the most crucial fourth part, The 6 platoons responsible for laying the rails officially began their work. 3 of these platoons, led by their guards, marched to the steel rolling mill to transport the building materials. There, they were stunned into silence by the sight that greeted them. Inside the rolling mill's workshop, tens of thousands of dark, heavy steel rails were piled like small mountains. Iron, a material more precious than gold in their minds, was treated here like common mud, stacked as if it were free for the taking. A teenager, his mouth agape, stammered in amazement. "Tch, these are all iron? The black rocks we dug were used to make this." An older worker next to him swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing, but could not force a single word out. Gods above. If they had known the Han possessed so much iron, they would not have dared to throw their lives away in battle, not even if they had the hearts of lions. With this much iron, if it were all forged into weapons and armor, it could likely arm every man, woman, and child in the Han tribe, and their dogs besides. What would have been the point of fighting? Even if every man in their Xian tribe had a head made of iron, it could not possibly be tougher than this torrent of steel. Inside the factory, machines roared. Orange-red steel ingots were squeezed and deformed by immense force, emitting ear-piercing shrieks as one scorching hot rail after another was spat out, rolling onto a nearby rack, still steaming. Watching this ceaseless production line, the 150 workers felt their scalps tingle. Are we really going to use this to pave a road? Someone in the crowd finally voiced the question that tormented them all. Has the Han tribe's iron become so abundant they have no other use for it? Enough nonsense. The foreman leading the team clapped his hands, snapping everyone back to reality. Line up. Figure out how to get this out of here. After a lively discussion, they came up with an idea. A team of 50 men would carry 2 rails using shoulder poles. However, the moment they shouldered the poles and lifted in unison, "Arg!" a collective groan went up as shoulders felt as if they might break. 200-meter-long rails weighed a full 7,000 caddies. Distributed among 50 men, that was an average of 140 caddies per person. For men accustomed to heavy labor, the weight was bearable, but the problem was the method. With over 100 caddies pressing down on a thin shoulder pole, moving in a long, single file, a single stumble from one man would send a wave of instability down the entire line. The team of 150 men grimaced in pain, the shoulder poles groaning under the strain, creating a scene that was both spectacular and comical. "This isn't going to work," a guard said, wincing at the sight. "This trip is only a few hundred meters. When we have to go further, we'll work these men to death." "Then what? One platoon carries 1 rail? That's too much of a waste of manpower," another countered. "I have an idea." A clever foreman's eyes lit up. "Let's do it this way for this trip. Next time, 1 platoon carries 1 rail, a man every 2 meters, carrying it directly with their hands. Once we've laid a kilometer, we'll find Director Lin and have him bring out that smoking locomotive. We'll use the train to pull the rails. The train will follow wherever we lay the track. What do you think? Gods, that's a brilliant idea." The foremen put their heads together and immediately made a decision. Meanwhile, at the entrance of the locomotive factory, the sleeper-laying team was not idle. Cart after cart of dark, burnt-smelling sleepers were brought from the warehouse. These square logs of pine had all undergone a special fireproofing treatment, their surfaces charred black. Though not as advanced as modern preservation methods, the effect was just as good. Like the blackened utility poles of another time, they could withstand decades of wind and rain. Following the foreman's instructions, the workers neatly laid these 1.2-meter-long sleepers every 35 centimeters on the compacted roadbed, creating a spectacular, ladder-like pattern stretching into the distance. The entire day was spent in a state of orderly bustle and profound shock. Welcome to the documentary, The Education of a Hard-Headed Warrior. Lesson 1. Do not challenge a professional with your hobby. In the face of absolute industrial strength, any warrior is a paper tiger. The men of the Xian tribe learned with their own eyes that what defeats you is not always the enemy, but his damnable, mountain-like productivity. This shock education for the new recruits gets a perfect score. Clang. With a deafening crash, 2 dark, heavy rails slammed to the ground, kicking up a cloud of dust. The workers from the 3 platoons, having walked only a few hundred meters, collapsed like discarded sacks, panting heavily. "Quickly, mung bean soup. Get it down their throats," a guard frantically directed the logistics staff, who rushed forward with the heat-relieving drink. Watching the men gulp it down, the guard's expression softened slightly. "All right, stop acting as if you're at a funeral. If you think it's too heavy, we'll carry 1 rail at a time. But let me make this clear. Today, it's just our 3 platoons on transport duty. There are 200 rails in total, and we must finish before dark. Tomorrow, it's someone else's turn. A collective sigh of relief went through the ranks. They had truly thought they would be carrying rails like that all day, a task that felt like a direct path to the underworld. On the other side, the men moving the sleepers were not having an easy time either. Though they had horse-drawn carts for transport, the solid, heavy logs, each weighing dozens of caddies, had to be moved by hand. They also had to be fitted with iron wire collars at both ends to prevent cracking. 50 men were responsible for 1 kilometer, which meant nearly 2,000 sleepers. By day's end, every man was so tired his back could barely straighten. If the first 2 tasks were pure manual labor, then securing the rails was a double torture of brawn and technique. The artisan foreman sent by Lin Fei was conducting pre-job training for 20 selected squad and platoon leaders. Watch closely, the foreman instructed, picking up a long-headed hammer and gesturing at the sleepers on the ground. This is a sleeper. Before you start, use the hammer head to measure the spacing. If it's off, tap it on both sides with the hammer to align it. Then, take this black rubber pad, a mix of sesame paste, asphalt, and rubber. High-grade stuff. Place it on the sleeper, then ram this steel base plate on top. Make sure it's aligned. As he spoke, he placed a steel plate with a central groove onto the rubber pad. Next, several artisans directed the men to lift a 100-meter-long rail with a great heave-ho, which then clicked neatly into the groove of the base plate. Watch carefully, the foreman continued. Once the rail is in place, use this railroad spike. Insert it into the hole in the steel plate, with the head pressing down on the base of the rail. Then, he stepped back, swung the sledgehammer, and with a few sharp blows, drove a finger-thick spike deep into the sleeper. The movement was clean and decisive. Remember, he explained, the spike needs to be driven in at a slight inward angle to lock the track. After driving the spike, use this spring clip, snap it on, and hammer it tight. The work on one sleeper is then complete. He wiped his sweat, his gaze sharpening. You 20 are the first. You must learn this. If you can't, how are you going to teach your men? If you delay the chief's important business, you can imagine the consequences. This group of specially cultivated trainees dared not slack off. They immediately paired up and started working from both ends of the sleepers, the air filling with a cacophony of hammering. By the time this crash course had stumblingly finished nailing the first 100-meter section of rail, they had grasped the basic operations. These fresh, junior foremen then returned to their respective teams and began to pass on their newfound skills. The entire installation team was soon immersed in a fervent atmosphere of learning and work. Hey, your spike is crooked. The hammer. Hold it steady. The spring clip. The clip first. From initial fumbling, they gradually became more proficient. By the time the 500th meter of rail was installed, the 100-man installation crew could drive spikes with their eyes closed. Their speed soared. Installing a 100-meter section of rail now took only 10 minutes. In the afternoon, when the tracks had been laid out for 1.6 kilometers, Lin Fei called a halt. Continuing with manual labor was simply too inefficient. He found me and proposed a bold idea: drive the train out directly, laying the tracks as it went. I confirmed the condition of the Striver prototype with Lin Fei and received his assurance. The train was ready. It had already been painted a grand black and red and was parked majestically in the garage. But a problem arose. There were no ready-made cars for transporting the long rails. The freight cars built previously all had walls, fine for sleepers, but useless for a 100-meter rail. Unless they used flat cars. Lin Fei chuckled and led me to the workshop. There, parked in rows, were strange, semi-finished cars. Only the wheel assemblies and a bare chassis frame. Standing on them, you could see the tracks directly below. In Lin Fei's words, the skeletons had been assembled, but they had not yet had time to add the flesh and skin. This design would be useless for transporting almost anything else, but for a 100-meter long rail, it was perfect. The length, stretching from the first car to the 8th, made it impossible for the rails to fall through. On the ingenious use of semi-finished products. This move fully demonstrates the wisdom of the working people in discovering and solving problems in practice. This is adapting to local conditions, making the best use of everything. A round of applause for Director Lin's ingenuity, and, of course, for the chief's foresight in knowing his people well and making the best use of their talents. Let's do it. I gathered with Lin Fei and a few core researchers, our heads bent together in a conspiratorial huddle. Soon, a plan so audacious it bordered on feral was born. The Striver prototype would serve as the locomotive. Following it would be 8 bare, semi-finished flat cars for transporting the rails, then 8 fully equipped freight cars for the sleepers, and finally, for passenger freight combo cars, stuffed with spikes, tools, and the track-laying crews. This was not a train. It was a mobile railway construction assembly line. Lin Fei and his craftsmen were flushed with excitement, like proud fathers about to give their daughters away in marriage. The iron behemoth they had built with their own hands was finally about to leave its cradle and conquer the outside world. Look alive, everyone. Oil, coal, and water. Fill them all. Lin Fei personally took charge, rightfully claiming the honor of being the first driver. He circled the small locomotive, checking it over and over, twisting a valve here, tapping a pipe there. Though his hands were covered in black soot, his face beamed with the joy of a child. Soon, the water in the boiler began to bubble, and the steam, superheated and furious, surged through the pipes. Lin Fei took a deep breath and yanked open a valve. Boom. Steam flooded the cylinders, pushing the pistons, driving the connecting rods. With a clang, the entire locomotive lurched forward half a meter. It moved. It moved. It really moved. The surrounding craftsmen erupted in a frenzy. Oh. Lin Fei triumphantly blew the whistle, its sharp shriek piercing the sky. He stood at the controls, shouting at the top of his lungs. Everyone clear the way. The train is leaving the station. Hiss, hiss, hiss. Puffs of thick white steam billowed from the sides of the wheels. The Striver prototype, under the watchful eyes of the masses, finally, slowly, rolled out of the workshop that had given it life. Outside, the slaves from the 4 platoons, who were preparing to continue moving rails, were completely dumbfounded. A moment ago, their guards had told them to wait, then vanished into the large, dark workshop. A cacophony of voices had erupted from within, as if a celebration was underway. Suddenly, a shriek unlike any human voice had made them jump. Next, billowing smoke poured from the doorway. An unknowing observer would have thought the place was on fire. As they stood there, confused, a group of craftsmen and guards ran out of the workshop as if fleeing for their lives, all of them staring intently at the deep doorway, as if some peerless, ferocious beast was about to emerge. And then it happened. Accompanied by a swirl of white mist, a deafening rumble grew closer. A red and black iron monster, spewing black smoke from its head and white steam from its sides, riding on steel wheels, sparks flying, howling woo-woo, burst through the mist and shot out of the workshop. The billowing white mist was like the beast's breath. The whistle on its head was like its roar. Oh my God, the slaves were terrified. They had never seen anything like it. What is that thing? A cart, someone asked foolishly. SH should be, right? See, it has wheels, and they're perfectly stuck on those 2 iron rods. Look, isn't that the coal we dug loaded in its backside? So this thing runs on coal. Aren't you all curious how this thing moves on its own, without any oxen or horses? The people around them just shook their heads numbly. Was it strange? Yes. But in the Han tribe, it also seemed perfectly normal. If they could make a large ship sail on the sea with just a piece of cloth, if they could build cannons that could kill people from miles away, what was so surprising about an iron contraption that moved on its own? This bunch of pitiful slaves had long been desensitized by the technological explosion I had brought about. Hiss, hiss, hiss. As the locomotive, spewing white smoke, passed in front of them and came to a steady stop 200 meters away, a guard came over. Stop standing there like idiots. Get into the workshop, push out all the cars behind it, and hook them up. Load the rest of the rails onto the cars. You won't have to carry them on your shoulders anymore. Hearing this, the slaves snapped out of their shock and erupted in a deafening cheer. No more carrying those back-breaking rails. A swarm of people rushed into the workshop. In groups of 20, they pushed out the bare skeletons of the cars. Craftsmen were already waiting outside. With a steel pin as thick as a rolling pin, they connected the cars to the locomotive. 1 car, 2 cars, 3 cars. Oh my heavens! If we hook them all up, won't it be as long as a snake? 8 flat cars, 8 freight cars, and 4 passenger freight combo cars. An iron dragon composed of 20 cars was thus born. Those moving the rails, those loading the sleepers, everyone worked in an orderly fashion. The entire construction site, with the arrival of this iron behemoth, was revitalized with an unprecedented vitality. High energy ahead. The steampunk version of Thomas and Friends is officially online. This isn't just a transportation task. This is a blatant display of industrial muscle. When absolute technological power crushes your perception, what else can you do but kneel and sing its praises? This move gave the slaves a profound understanding of what it means to be different. Good heavens, did you count? Not including that big red-headed fella. There are 16 cars hanging off the back, loaded with either iron or logs. How heavy must it all be? Can that iron contraption really pull it? A slave whispered to the man beside him. Nonsense. If it couldn't pull it, would they have let us load it? The other man rolled his eyes. They're not going to make us push it from behind, are they? Even if we were willing, we couldn't move this thing. That makes sense, another man realized. No wonder the road has to be paved with iron, with so many logs underneath. If this thing ran on a dirt road, the wheels would sink right in. Everyone nodded in agreement, their hands moving with renewed purpose. 2 hours later, all the rails and sleepers had been loaded. They were called back to the workshop and, with much grunting and groaning, pushed out 4 cars of a completely different design. This was my specially designed passenger freight combo car, a heavily modified creation. I had no intention of running a proper passenger service. In this era, who would take a train for leisure? So, I designed the cars like a hospital corridor. Imagine a car 12 meters long and 1.6 meters wide, with rows of foldable wooden benches hung on the walls. For passengers, you would pull the benches down. 2 rows of people could sit facing each other, with an aisle in the middle. If it was crowded, they could stand, much like on a modern bus. Tickets were sold per head, with no assigned seats. After all, they were long benches. 4 people could sit, 8 could squeeze. It was all about efficiency. If there were no passengers, you would fold the benches up against the wall. The entire car would instantly become a square shipping container, convenient for hauling cotton, grain, and all sorts of clean equipment. The roof was a simple awning to block the sun and rain, and the upper half of the sidewalls was open, with only a bamboo curtain that could be manually lowered for ventilation and a connection to the passing scenery. In short, this was a super freight car disguised as a passenger car, its purpose dictated entirely by my whim. Line up, get on. When these 4 empty cars were attached to the rear of the train, the guards' voices rang out again. 1 platoon per car. See the benches on the wall. Pull them down to sit. Grab your tools and squeeze in. If you can't fit, sit on the floor. My God, we get to ride in a car. The slaves were overjoyed. After working all day, their legs felt as if they might break. They had never expected such a luxury. Everyone swarmed onto the cars, lowered the folding benches, and leaned back comfortably, grinning at their companions opposite. 50 men to a platoon, and 1 car was spacious enough for them all. Brothers, a man said suddenly in a low voice, I have some regrets. Regret what? The man next to him asked. I regret listening to that old fool of a clan chief and insisting on raiding the Han, he said, shaking his head with a bitter smile. Look at the life they live. We haven't even mastered horse-drawn carts, and they've already built this kind of divine vehicle. 1 car can hold 50 people, with seats, and there are several more in front. If they want to carry more people, can't they just add more cars? He paused, his voice filled with bitterness. We treated the Han as an enemy. Thinking about it now, it's laughable. In their eyes, we were probably no different from monkeys who had just learned to farm. A dead silence fell over the car. Regrets? Who among them did not have regrets? But what was the use of it now? Just as the men were lost in thought, another loud thud came from the rear of the train. A few foremen, realizing they would not be returning to the city that night, had dragged out 2 dining cars from the workshop and hooked them up. 1 car was for grain and fresh water. The other was even more impressive, directly fitted with several coal stoves and cutting boards, instantly transformed into a mobile kitchen. Following that, the guards of each platoon, carrying handheld carbide lamps that emitted a bright, white light, also boarded the cars. In the twilight, the entire train transformed into a mobile fortress, ready to embark on a long expedition. From shoulder carrying to mechanized transport, from measuring the land with their feet to riding a train, this was not just an increase in efficiency. It was a repeated shattering of the prisoner's worldview. Regrets? It was too late for that. The only thing they could do now was to cling to the chief's vision and strive to become outstanding builders of this new era. And a mobile kitchen? That was the ultimate dream of any construction worker. As evening fell, a carbide lamp ignited with a hiss in the dimly lit passenger car. The brilliant white light banished the gloom, illuminating faces weary, numb, and astonished. Men squinted instinctively against the sudden glare. You have all worked hard today. Rest for now. The guard's voice echoed in the bright carriage. We will eat when we reach the worksite. Get some rest early tonight. He paused, his gaze sweeping over the crowd. Starting tomorrow, our platoon will no longer be moving the iron rails. The ones loaded on the train are enough for a day or 2. You will all go and learn to install the tracks, the part with the nailing. Seize this opportunity. Watch carefully and learn well. Strive to become master craftsmen by the time this road is finished. Then, Han citizenship will be firmly within your grasp. The guard's voice carried an undeniable persuasive power. The Xian tribe you knew is a thing of the past. Open your eyes and look at the future. Look at this train. Consider the power of this machine. It needs no ox or horse to pull it. It runs on nothing more than boiling water. And yet, it can pull so many men and so much cargo at once. I will not lie to you. This train is a new marvel our Han people have just created. This railway you are building is our very first. When it is finished, you will understand its true power. It can pull more than a ship and run faster than a horse. In the future, with this, what power on earth can stand against us? And you, his voice rose, are the Han's first railway men. As long as you learn this trade, settling down among the Han is the least of your rewards. Do you want to live a good life? That will be even easier, because the tribe will certainly build more railways. When that time comes, you will be the most experienced master craftsman of all. The dying Li shaman had not been able to eat for days. His ambitious nephew, Mao Li, had taken more than 20 clansmen to trade with the Han. It was as if a stone had been dropped into the sea. They were never heard from again. The 10 warriors sent after them had also vanished. The old shaman knew in his heart what Mao Li's scheme had been. He had sought to use the Han's power for his own gain, a fool's errand to extort their bronze wares, to rely on their strength for your own development, only to turn and try to bite the hand that feeds you. It was a scheme born of arrogance, doomed from the start. They should have known that what the Han were willing to give away meant they possessed far more and far better for themselves. To play such games with the Han was to invite ruin. The shaman had wanted only to watch his tribe grow stronger day by day, but the reckless Mao Li seemed determined to lead them into a pit of fire. The old man was so fraught with worry his hair felt as if it might fall out. 2 days later, he did not receive his returning clansmen, but a peculiar party from the south. It was a company of over 60 people, led by a young man riding a horned deer. In the middle of the procession, 2 old oxen slowly pulled a wheeled house. Most eye-catching of all was the group of oinking black and white piglets being herded by 10 young girls. This was Yu Fu and his pig farming brigade. The cabbages on their cart had long been devoured, so Yu Fu had been forced to slow their pace, leading his little charges to forage each day. He had intended to bypass the Li tribe's lands, but he was stopped by the shaman himself. "Chief, are you from the Han tribe?" the Li shaman asked, his eyes filled with desperate hope as he took in the horned deer and the ox cart. "Have you seen our clansmen who went to trade? They have been gone for many days." "Huh." Yu Fu was bewildered. "Han tribe? I am not." Then this horned deer and this ox cart. "Oh, this." Yu Fu patted the deer beneath him with a proud expression. "We are friends with the Han. We traded for these." "Traded for them?" The shaman was even more confused. "But the Han do not trade such treasures." Yu Fu's chin rose. "As I said, we are friends. We can help the Han, so naturally, they are willing to trade good things with us. By the way, your tribe also trades with the Han? What did you trade for?" Hearing that the other party was not Han but had a close relationship with them, the Li shaman pleaded, "We trade a type of poisonous tree for their pottery and white salt. But this time, our chief went and never came back. Chief, seeing as you are on your way to the Han, I beg you, could you help us find out what has become of my clansmen?" "Ah, so that's how it is." Yu Fu's eyes darted. His merchant's mind began to churn. "Of course, we happen to be on our way there. But we cannot say when we will return. If you want us to send a rider back with a message for you, you will have to offer something in trade."